15 willow tree facts to wow you. These surprisingly supple willow tree facts are guaranteed not to make you weep. They're one of the most recognizable trees, even if you're not really a tree person. But how much do you know about willows? Worry not. In the extremely unlikely event, a supervillain kidnaps. But there are a lot of species of willow, around 350, in fact. Willow is used for most of them, but some species are also called sallow or osier. Sallows has broad leaves, while osiers have narrow ones. Willows are deciduous trees, and the mighty redwood tree can hit 300 feet. Weeping willows usually grow between 45 and 70 feet. Because they grow so quickly, scientists have experimented with using willows to create biofuel, an alternative to fossil fuels. They're usually very wide though, sometimes as wide as they are tall. Some other species of willow are particularly tiny. The dwarf willow rarely gets higher than 6 centimeters. They're often found next to rivers and ponds, and they can be useful if you have a garden prone to flooding. They live about 30 years on average, though some well-looked-after willows have lived as long as 50 years. Lots of water will help your already fast-growing willow tree grow even faster, but they also need plenty of sun too. Willow bark has been used medicinally for thousands of years. There are references to it in texts from ancient Greece, Rome, Assyria, Sumer, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. Most parts of a willow are perfectly edible. Catkins, the clustering flowers that hang from willow branches, were sometimes eaten by the poor, cooked to make a mash. The leaves, buds, and inner bark can also be eaten. However, they have a very bitter taste and are usually only eaten as a last resort. And it is known to have been used by Native Americans too. Willow bark was used for several things, but it seems to be especially effective as a painkiller. It contains a precursor to aspirin, which is a drug popularly used to treat headaches, which means they shed their leaves seasonally, the opposite of evergreens, which are, well, take a guess. In Buddhism, willows are symbolic of Guanyin, the bodhisattva, enlightened teacher of compassion. In Judaism, they're associated with the festival of Sukkot and used in the synagogue services on the 7th day of the festival. Orthodox Christian churches also sometimes use willow branches instead of palm leaves on Palm Sunday. I won't let you go until you can list 15 facts about willow trees. You're going to be prepared. They also have an association with death, though theirs is a little spookier. Willow trees are thought to be where ghosts appear. They're often associated with grief and mourning for obvious reasons. But there is also at least one account from Somerset folklore of willows, uprooting themselves to follow unwary travelers, muttering to themselves as they go, and they show up in a lot of folk stories. One story is about Yanaji Bab Willow Hag, but here's one you probably hadn't thought about. In the film, Pocahontas gets advice from Grandmother Willow, a wise weeping willow tree. But the film is set in 1607, long before the weeping willow was introduced to the USA. She also says she's about 400 years old, which is a very long lifespan for a willow tree. There is an Osage Nation story about a man seeking advice from a willow tree he calls grandfather, which might be where Disney got the idea. A yokai supernatural being in the form of an ugly old woman. She's said to appear under willow trees and beckon men to her. Willow wood is very good for making bats and stumps, because its flexibility means it can absorb shock without splintering. So they're very useful for a number of things, wicker, for one. They've traditionally been used in basket weaving, and during both World Wars these lightweight baskets were used for parachutes, hot air balloons, and carrier pigeon baskets. In fact, willow baskets were so important in World War I that in 1923, a national willow collection was established, complete with a willow officer, at the Government Research Station at Long Ashton, Bristol. The collection still exists today, though it's moved to Hertfordshire. The team continue to research ways to use willow to make life easier. Willow trees are diminishing in the UK and in other places where willows are grown for the purpose of cricket bat making, like India and Australia. So alternatives to willow bats are sometimes used. Stories vary about what happens to the men, but it's never good. Get ready to be amazed. You won't be weeping at the end. Weeping willows are recognizable because of that iconic umbrella shape. They always look like they're crying, but not all willows weep. In fact, some species are upstanding. They probably traveled to Europe via the Silk Road, an enormous Eurasian trading route. Willows have an important place in Chinese folklore, where they're associated with death. During the annual Qingming Festival, Tomb Sweeping Day in English, Willow branches are used to sweep the graves of ancestors, and they're also placed on doors and gates to ward away evil spirits. Most species do have long, silvery leaves and wispy branches though. 1. There are 350 species. When we say willow, we're usually referring to weeping willows, and so most of these facts specifically refer to the weeping willow. 2. Do you think they look sad? It's obvious how the weeping willow got its nickname. 3. They're surprisingly short. Well, compared to other trees, certainly not compared to a person. While oak trees can grow past 100 feet. 4. They're very fast growing. Despite not getting to tall, willows grow very quickly, at a rate of about 3 to 4 feet per year. 5. They're like sponges. Weeping willows need a lot of water to grow. They're very thirsty. 6. They don't live very long. Unlike some other trees like oaks and redwoods, willows have short lifespans. 7. They can be used in medicine. Willows aren't just pretty to look at, they're also surprisingly useful. 8. You can eat them, but you probably wouldn't want to. 9. They came from China. Willows can be seen all over the world, but they originated in China. 10. In Japanese folklore, they're associated with ghosts. Willow trees are a part of Japanese culture too. 11. They're important in religion. Several major religions feature willows and willow branches as an important part of their mythology. Willows also appear in English folklore, and they're sinister here too. 13. There shouldn't be one in Pocahontas. Disney's 1995 film Pocahontas has been criticized for being historically inaccurate in a lot of ways. 14. Cricket bats are made from willow wood. The great British pastime of cricket would be nowhere without willow trees. 15. Willow wood was very useful in wartime. Willow branches are springy and flexible.